also works with the Architectural Engineering and Technology Department in the section of Climate Design and Sustainability. So very interesting background as well for joining our today's discussion. And yes, with this, please, Dave, feel free to take the microphone and moderate our afternoon session.
Thank you. And I need a little bit of help because I'm on our lovely link and I'm seeing I've got jury detail, agenda, second round, and I'm looking for the details of the speakers and oh, here we are. So Chris is first, I think. Is that correct?
As you please, David.
Yes,
it's your session.
Yes. I'm following the link. I'm following the link. Chris, I think you're up first. Is that correct?
That's fine with me, yes.
Yes, fantastic. And that's at least what I see. Anyway, I think what I'd like to do is really to dive in quite quickly, because obviously I can give a long preamble and a lot of discussion, but actually I really want to give the time to the speakers, if that's okay. And I think, Chris, you have some super things to tell us. I'll let you also introduce yourself and say a little bit about yourself rather than me doing it for you, because you'll do a better job than I will, because you know yourself better than I do. Is that okay for you?
Absolutely, yes. Thanks a lot for that, Dave. Let me just share my screen. Here we are. I hope you can all now see my screen in presentation mode.
Yes, indeed. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks a lot. Welcome to all of you to this afternoon session. So my name is Chris Bacchus. I'm a research manager at HIVA Research Institute of KU Leuven, which is obviously in Leuven in Belgium. And I'm also the coordinator of the Horizon 2020 project Pop-Machina, which I will present to you in this presentation. So very briefly, a summary on what the project is about. Maybe to start with, we're a rather large European project with 23 partners from 8 countries. So it's quite a coordination effort, you could say. Looking at the objectives of our project, what we wanted to do when we submitted it is to have a better understanding of what we call the maker movement and maker movement initiatives. I will get back to those terms in a moment. But more importantly, we also wanted to support and connect the maker movement, so existing makers in several cities in Europe, and also support and demonstrate their activities in our pilot cities. And our pilot cities, we have 7 of them, are Leuven, Venlo, Thessaloniki, Santander in Spain, Kaunas in Lithuania, Piraeus and Istanbul. So these are quite diverse cities, going from rather small to quite large, also in terms of profile, socio-economic, etc., and industrial, etc. We have some differences, which makes it interesting to see how a maker movement, an existing maker movement, can be studied, and also how we can further support it and let it grow, because that is what we are aiming for with our project. So what one of the activities we are deploying is the so-called Pop-Machina online platform, which is obviously an online platform where materials can be exchanged on the local level, but also on a higher level, where trainings can be offered or can be exchanged, yes. Skills can be exchanged, can be offered to others who can then use them, etc. Events can be shared, information can be shared, it's a discussion platform, and so on. So what we wanted to create is really like kind of a central platform where everyone who is at least interested in making and maker movement initiatives, or is highly involved in it, or is only slightly involved in it, where all these people with some interest in this movement can participate to exchanges with other people with similar or complementary interests. So part of our project is also a number of training activities. We are also supporting startups. Nikos has just in the session right before this session, he explained what they're doing in Thessaloniki towards startups. So we have a significant entrepreneurial part in our project. And we also aim at contributing to, especially our pilot cities, strategy development at the city level, to have like policy plans on circular economy, and obviously to have an aspect of making in those circular economy strategies. So we are using a number of techniques and methodologies in our project. One is urban analysis, where we closely study all the characteristics of our cities to see what kind of activities could have the best fit where, which kind of communities can be built around it, etc. In terms of training, this is mainly Fab Lab Barcelona in charge of this. We have a number of trainings where we especially or particularly train the trainer, and then our aim is to have these people or local maker champions to go back to their cities and there make sure that they can train other people, makers and other people interested. As I said, we have some entrepreneurial activities, which is mainly support for startups, business services. If people want to take the step from more like a citizen initiative towards becoming a company, a startup, then we can offer some support, some training, some consulting, some business planning, etc. But the most important part of our project, I must say, is actually the deployment, the implementation of new maker spaces in our 7 pilot cities, and even more importantly, building maker communities around them, or engaging with, connecting with existing maker movements that are already in place and maybe do not consider themselves maker movements, but maybe they're just groups of citizens who come together to make things. Obviously, we call them part of the maker movement, and we try to connect all these people and all these dynamics in our 7 cities. So these are the places. You can see our cities on the European map here, and I will just go very briefly into each of these cities, some elements that are going on there. I wanted to start with our pilot city of Santander, because actually most of our cities take one specific focus that they want to develop more than other elements. And for Santander, this is actually the plastics topic. So this is most relevant for the challenge that we have today. So they are focusing on plastic recycling, but it's also a more general, you could say, Fab Lab that is in the phase of development in Santander, in the north of Spain, where 3D printers, repair equipment, tools for digital manufacturing, and obviously also tools for plastic recycling are being offered and can be used by makers or schools or businesses or other parties interested. They also did an analysis of types of plastic which are the best suited for which type of recycling. So this is some research work that has preceded the actual start of the initiative. I must say that normally all the makerspaces in all our pilot cities should have been fully operational and already in process for some time. But obviously, due to the COVID-19 crisis, there have been some delays here and there. And now most of our initiatives are kind of in startup phase, have recently been opened or are on the verge of opening in the coming weeks. The second city I wanted to present is actually my own city. It's Leuven, who has 2 main initiatives. The first one is the so-called Maak Leerplek. I'm sure you can guess what it means. It's a place for making and learning, so it's not too hard to understand. And the aim is actually to have a venue where companies, schools, artists, local residents, citizens can come together to learn, to exchange ideas, but also actually to manufacture goods and to work together. And the makerspace is located in a old heritage, industrial heritage site, which is actually part of the old Stella Artois brewery, which you may know is originating from Leuven. So this building was retrofitted to become the Maak Leerplek, and now it's a dynamic venue where all these actors come together for several types of making initiatives. Second initiative in Leuven is the so-called Materials Bank, which has a focus on building components. Usually after demolishing a building, it is like used for rather low-level types of recycling. And Leuven decided to be more ambitious than that. And instead of going for recycling of all these building components, they wanted to go for reuse of the building components. So make sure they can be used for the purpose that they were manufactured for maybe some decades ago. So that's what this Materials Bank was developed, which is a trading place, a marketplace, you could call it. It's a lot of wood, but also other materials, including metals, and actually finished products are being offered, being sold to other people, both citizens, companies who are retrofitting houses or other buildings, and where high-level circular operations can be done with these materials higher than recycling. So we also have the city of Piraeus, which I'm sure these pictures are a couple of months old, is already further now. It's a more general type of Fab Lab that is being developed there. The next city is Kaunas in Lithuania, where the building that is being developed is part of a university campus, which obviously has the advantage of being close to students, allowing for some integration with some education programs of the university. But obviously, which is also the intention of our project, it is aimed to be much more than that, not only collaboration with the university, but also for regular citizens, residents, and startups, etc., to be available for local collaborative production initiatives. The next city is Thessaloniki, where the so-called OK TESS startup incubator was designed. Which is, as it says, an incubator. Thessaloniki has made the choice of putting a particular focus on the entrepreneurial side, so developing, supporting startups who want to become a formal company involved in the act of making. So the city and the makerspace is offering several services and types of support to the people and businesses that wish to develop in that direction. We have Venlo in a rather small city in the Netherlands, where the organization called Can Doen is opening a makerspace. And actually there, the focus is very much on the topic of social inclusion. They are also in themselves kind of a social organization, which aims at employing people who are with some distance to the labor market. And these people are being employed in the organization also to make goods, mostly out of scrap material, secondhand material, etc. They are being sold, so it's a way of reintegrating some of these staff members into society, into the regular labor market, and at the same time being involved in circular making activities. So for most cities in Pop-Machina, this element of social inclusion is quite important, because we try not to be there just for like the general population, but we try to develop a specific focus to more vulnerable parts of the population. And that's why several of our cities also pick the spots or the location of their newly to be developed makerspace quite carefully, in the sense that, and this is also what the next city and the last city has done, Istanbul. What they have done is to develop this the makerspace in an area where a lot of disadvantaged people, families, and groups also live, so that it's not only like the people who are really well connected in this maker movement who know that there's a makerspace being opened, but also, and this is also the case for many other of our cities, that people who are just happen to pass by because they live in the neighborhood or because they're there for a different reason in the building, because many of our buildings are multifunctional. So they offer all kinds of services to citizens, to disadvantaged groups, so that people can come and see, and that they see, oh, what is this? What is, I don't know, this room of the building? Oh, what's happening here? Oh, okay, it's a makerspace, it's a Fab Lab. What's happening here? They can just enter, they can smell the atmosphere, and if they like, they can participate to all kinds of initiatives, some of which are specifically aimed at these vulnerable groups. Okay, I will leave it here. So there's enough space and time for discussion. So the floor is back to you, Dave.
Yes, thank you, Chris. And we're a little bit ahead of time. And I know, as you rightly remind everybody, at 14:50 Central European time in this session, please stay on, because we'll have a roundtable and time for Q&A, and we'll all be there together to take those questions from the delegates and from the floor. But while we've got a few minutes just before the next speaker comes in, and I'll introduce her in a moment, I just want to ask a question, and I should declare my interests for the listeners. Of course, I'm also involved in Pop-Machina, and I support our city Venlo as well as all the other cities in the super work that we're doing. But this is a question that we can explore. But circular plastics, and that's the theme of this session today. In the project, the Pop-Machina project, plastics was not named as a material. No materials were named specifically in the project proposal and the way it's set up, but it has evolved as an important material in our circular maker spaces. Why do you think that is? Why is it that the exciting activities in our cities in this project, why is plastic become so important?
Well, my take on this would be that we heard some of the answers in the previous session this morning already. We know the challenges that are related to plastics, that it's a growing stream of waste. Packaging waste is growing enormously, or has grown enormously. The recycling rates throughout Europe are still rather modest, we should say. Then again, the potential for recycling also has some limitations. So it will also be good to think of ways to avoid like very low level of recycling, and maybe replace it by upcycling activities. I think apart from that, we also have some developments, for instance, the 3D development technology, which is becoming increasingly important, where plastics can actually be used as a resource to make new things. So that would be a high level on the circularity ladder. That would be high level of recycling. So there are a number of there is quite some potential, I would say, and maybe some elements that are coming together. On one side is to use a resource, and on the other side, which is the challenge of plastic waste and plastic packaging waste, that is making that people are combining, and they're saying 1 and 1 is 3, and maybe we should do something with this. And that's why I think that's probably one of the reasons why a lot of initiatives are emerging in the maker movement on plastics. But I think maybe it would also be a good idea. I see Celia is in the meeting. I hope that's the Celia we know from our Pop-Machina project in Santander. Is that the case? And if that is the case, then maybe Celia could explain more specifically for their city what they're doing exactly with plastics as a topic, as a material, and why exactly they chose to select this material or this stream as compared to other potential streams. So Celia, are you the Celia that I know, or are you?
I think so. And if we don't, if we don't have time for that now, perhaps she can join in the second round at 14:50.
Maybe the question's already raised, and maybe she can jump in later.
Yeah. That would be fantastic. No, I did. I was just reflecting as well, and we'll move to frenzy in a second. But I was just reflecting because in the projects I noticed big focus on plastics, big focus on wood as well. So wood products, and I know our focus in the discussion today is around plastics. And then I was thinking to myself, while you were giving all the very sensible and correct reasons why we're doing this, but I was also reflecting, we're surrounded with the stuff. So for citizens who want to engage into maker activities in a circular way, plastic is to hand. And I'm just sitting here at my desk, you know, and suddenly I can gather up handfuls of plastic just on my desk in front of me. It is everywhere and all around us. And of course, so much of it is wasted and lost. So it's an abundant material in terms of waste and in terms of opportunity. And I think it's really exciting what we see going on in our cities. Thank you, Chris. This is really interesting. Please stay, because we'll obviously explore this more in the next session. I see already Frenzy has joined us, and I would just say, if I may, Frenzy, I'm just and because you may say more things about what you're doing and but I'll just introduce you briefly. You support the Metabolic Institute, and you're a sustainability researcher, and I really like this, an industrial ecologist. This is excellent. We like industrial ecologists. And you're in various consortium-based pan-European research projects, which is fantastic. You're trained as an interdisciplinary systems thinker, which I think is excellent, because Circular is all about interdisciplinary systems thinkers. And you enjoy working with cities, regions, and other organizations, exactly. And we've just heard from Chris about Pop-Machina, which is exactly what we're talking about. And you like to analyze urban sustainability issues and find integrated solutions. So two key words there jump out at me: interdisciplinary systems thinking, integrated solutions. I'm going to stop there in my introduction of you. If there may be more things you want to say, but Frenzy, if you're ready, yes, please, the floor is yours.
I will just try to share my screen. Let's see how that works. Yeah, what a nice introduction. There are a lot of keywords that you mentioned, which definitely will show up in my presentation. Do you see my screen now? Because I don't know if I show the right screen or not. Yes?
You do, yes.
Great, perfect. Well, I'm really excited to partake in one of the pan-European cross-fertilization talks here. It's quite interesting to be part of Pop-Machina. I'm just going to give a few more sentences about my introduction. I work on two other reflow EU projects called Reflow and Centrino. I don't know, some of you might have heard about those. They're actually quite at the intersection between Pop-Machina. Reflow deals with material streams through 6 pilot cities. One of them, which I'll present today, which is a plastics case study, and Centrino is on reusing industrial heritage sites to become innovation hubs and maker spaces. So really right in the middle. And as you already so nicely said, I'm here from Metabolic Institute. We are a part of an ecosystem of organizations, for those of you who don't know Metabolic. We also have a consultancy which works more with private businesses and cities to consult them on the circular economy. We have a ventures building branch, very new. We have a software branch, and we are mostly dealing with tools there to try to kind of automate a couple of our methods. So as you said, I'm a researcher, sustainability researcher, and I am trained as an industrial ecologist, but today you'll see that side really. So I'll walk you through one of the key methods that we use in research in industrial ecology, which is called the material flow analysis. So I hope it takes us from the maker space, the maker movement, to a little bit of a larger scale to see how maybe we can link those two up, right? All right, so today I was going to have one slide on how at Metabolic we work with plastics. So really where does plastic sit in our work? And then I spend most of the time to walk you through a case study, a plastics material flow analysis for Vele. And actually, I don't know if all of you have been here in the morning session, but Anne-Louise from the municipality of Vele has already given you some insights into her side of the plastics challenges in the city, and I'll talk you through the background research that we've done. So if you haven't been there, don't worry, but if you have, then you might recognize a few of the names and the places. And then I'll end with a few key insights that I have gathered from my experience in that case study. All right, so at Metabolic, we have a lot of different themes that we are dealing with. We deal a lot with cities and regions, as you already said, David. We have a lot of built environment projects and also projects in the plastic sector. But really, plastics is something that goes across all of our projects. So when we talk to cities, obviously the topic of plastic waste and waste management is one that constantly comes up. When we work with industry, it's a lot about comparing different supply chain alternatives. For example, for the Can Manufacturing Institute, we have done a very detailed analysis on comparing plastics versus glass versus aluminum cans. And then we have also a lot of case studies on the food and agriculture sector, where we look at plastics and alternative packaging materials. So it's all around us. So there's not really a project that we deal with where plastic isn't at least one part of the problem.
I will interrupt you briefly, Francie. I'm sorry, but your slide is flickering a lot and in and out. I don't know if it's because you're clicking on it or not.
Not, but is it like this better at all? No.
Now it's good, but sometimes it zooms. No, now it zoomed out again. Okay. So
maybe if I don't do anything like this, is it still not working?
Now it's good, but I think it's when you touch the slide.
Okay, let's see. I try not to touch it anymore, and then we'll see if it works.
Okay.
But I hope I still can change the slides. Let me just see. Yeah.
Yeah, we can.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks a lot.
All right, let's see if that works. Thanks for letting me know. I don't want you to look at a flickering slide. So coming back to what David said earlier, at Metabolic, we use a lot of systems thinking to look at a problem. That means we look at things in a connected way and across scales. So we have projects that look at materials individually, but we always embed those in their supply chains. And lastly, also in cities and consumption systems of bigger regions, right? And today I'll talk about the city scale, so the lower one here. All right, I come right to our case study, and please let me know if the flickering has stopped. And also, David, I just see like one time I still have mentioned that it's not a peak, it's a peak. It's not a peak of plastic, but with a double E, so apologies for that. Vejle is a city in Denmark, and they have come to us with a challenge in Reflow to tackle their plastics waste problem, and they wanted to focus on food and healthcare packaging. One of the research questions we had really was, okay, what materials should Vejle tackle first to become more circular? Is there even such a thing as a circular city and for plastics? And what we have done for Vejle is a material flow analysis. This is an MFA in images. So basically we have looked at all of the materials that contain plastic which are imported into the city. This could be anything from toys to resins that are imported by the industry, to healthcare packaging like blood bags that you see here. Then we have looked at where in the city is that consumed, and lastly, what happens to it, right? So what products get exported? So it's actually conveyor belts in Vejle that get exported a lot, so that's why you see a conveyor belt here. And what waste do we see? Our research journey to get to that end image, which you'll see in a moment, was first of all starting to sketch out the system. So basically we need to understand the boundaries, right? So an MFA always looks at, it's kind of like a box. Imagine a bin and you're measuring everything that goes inside the bin and then leaves the bin again. And we need to somehow define the bin, right? How big is it? What year are we looking at? Once we had verified that with the city itself, we became data detectives. So we looked at the city's waste reports, we looked at national waste analyses from Denmark, we looked at sometimes EU-wide composition data of cars. I tell you, one time I had to research exactly what polymers are within a car and how many cars are consumed within or bought each year within the city of Denmark, so Vejle. So it's been a very detailed and long process, but very insightful along the way. It was iterative, so we had to go back to the city and like verify what if that actually was how the system really works. And this is the MFA. I don't know if you have seen a Sankey diagram before. If you haven't, you read this from left to right. So on the left side, you see the production of polymers, which happens outside of the city, obviously. And then you follow the lines. The thicker line, the higher the stream. It's quite self-explanatory, but sometimes can be overwhelming. So I'll take you through step by step to show you a few insights. The first insight is quite humbling, that a lot of the data we don't know. And this is especially true for plastics that are imported as part of, for example, intermediate goods that get processed further. It's just something that is really hard to get data for. And the second insight that I think is super important sharing is that volume isn't impact, right? So PVC is a very small stream that you see here in the bottom, but it's highly impactful in the production. I just wanted to show you this graph. It's not so important to know the details here, but you see that purple big bar in the middle. That means whilst PVC is a small stream, it has a large contribution to air emissions. So really MFAs can tell us something, but they don't tell us the entire picture. So it's really important to look at the impact and not only the material volume. When we move further along, the gray box that you see in the middle is the city itself, right? So the consumption. You see the main consumers here, local plastics industry, obviously consumes a lot. But one of the leverage points for the city itself was the food packaging and the packaging imports. You see that is in the middle here, where the big three is, around 4,200 tons of packaging get imported. Interestingly, there's a very active food industry. So we had to find out how much gets consumed by households, but how much also gets consumed by the food industry, right? Because that defines what the city can do about it. Vele has also done some close-up studies of what type of packaging they have. I don't want to go into detail with those, but the graph that you see here just shows us around 12% are products that can hardly be recycled, such as meat packaging, which is often black. Black packaging usually means no recycling. And yeah, so basically what we try to do is understand close up what packaging there is, but also in what kind of system does it sit, right? Moving on the export side, those gray arrows show us that a lot of plastics and products get exported and not really dealt with in the local waste infrastructure. I think that's really important to keep in mind because it shows us that these products that get produced within Vele will end up in some other waste system, right? And the design choices that are done within Vele are affecting some other waste system. So something for making, I think this is very important to keep in mind. And when you look at the lower half, so that's the next thing I want to show, the lower half of the stream is now the actual waste system. So around 8,200 tons got collected by various waste streams. So that is private collection, recycling stations, recycling bins, and so on. We found around 30% actually get recycled, mostly by being shipped to Netherlands and Germany. And this is nothing new, but just to reiterate this here, the challenges to the recycling system were really those multi-layer packaging that we see, low-grade foils, black plastic products, which cannot be recognized by the facilities. The interesting thing for us really was to see that the recycling quote first was kind of bigger. The city didn't expect that most of it got then turned into fuel as a byproduct. So when you take low-grade plastic and you make substitute fuel out of it, that cannot really be counted as recycling. So that was quite interesting to see. On this graphic that you see here too, we wanted to dig a little bit deeper and understand within the residual waste, so that is the waste that got sent to incineration directly, how much packaging is there, right? So how much potential could there be for recovering that and recycling it? That data was really hard to get, so we had to use Danish studies to downscale to Vele. But we found that around 1/3 of that plastics that we find in the residual waste is food packaging. There were some really detailed studies on that. So food packaging emerged again as a leverage point for the city to really deal with. And these are just the main insights I wanted to share with you before going to some more general takeaways for the last 5 minutes. First of all, what I cannot really stress enough is that we need to be very certain about the problem that we're actually solving. If you haven't seen this image before, these are the planetary boundaries, and they show really which of the planetary boundaries we already passed into a danger zone, which you see in red. When we talk about plastics, and the challenge of plastic is mostly that plastics is a fossil fuel, and that there are greenhouse gas emissions associated with it. But at the same time, what problem are we really solving when we shift, for example, to bioplastics that then come from monocrop plantations that shift more us into the danger zone in this biosphere boundary that you see here, right? So being really aware about burden shifting of different solutions, that's one of the challenging but also most important issues within the circular city and the circular plastics debate. I wanted to give a short example just to show you what I mean by what problem we are solving for. So as an example, back to the food packaging, one of the events that we've seen was food packaging that is not even recycled, but sent straight through the residual bin to incineration, right? And what we are really trying to do is finding the root cause of that problem. And at Metabolic, we use this nice metaphor of an iceberg to go deeper and deeper to understand that root cause. Taking that as an example, the event that we see might be that food packaging is thrown into a residual bin and incinerated. So we might try to understand how to increase recovery. But when we look at the underlying pattern, is it maybe not the packaging that we're dealing with, but that people don't recycle food waste from the packaging, right? Could be that we're just getting lazy and we throw food waste with the packaging right into the residual bin. So that's the pattern. Going one step deeper, what is the systemic structure that drives that pattern? Well, it could be confusing labels, best off dates that make people waste food too early, and these kinds of things. And then at the deepest level, what is the actual mental model that makes us behave that way? Is it that we don't value food enough? I just want to show this as an example that the problem that we're solving maybe wasn't food recycling rates in the beginning, but more dealing with food waste and the underlying problem that leads us to waste food, which would also have a better effect on greenhouse gas emissions than just focusing on packaging itself. This is just a nice illustration of how sometimes when we talk about plastics and packaging recycling rates, it's about just going deeper and deeper to understand the problem. The second insight that I wanted to add is that a circular city is really not possible if the city is the only driving force in this. We need the private innovation ecosystem. We need makers like you and businesses and industries to play along. And when working with Vele together, we found that procurement is one thing that they can change. So basically, what is the city purchasing? But there are a lot of things that they cannot change directly, right? What is the design choices then local manufacturers have? What are the infrastructure that exists outside of the city itself, right? So we need the innovation ecosystem. I had a few points that I just thought it's nice to share what cities and makers can do. Well, for cities, I think it's really important that they communicate to local producers directly what can be recovered in their systems, right? They can send market signals by purchasing products. They can facilitate supply chain collaborations, like has been done between some of them retailers in Denmark. I don't know if André has talked about that already. And lastly, we're looking into what can be done through, for example, local innovation challenges, right? How can the city become a facilitator in kind of harnessing the potential of the local innovation ecosystem to solve local challenges? And for the makers, just lastly, I think what's important for them to know is to know the system and to be aware of the recycling regulations that exist within the markets where your products are being consumed. And remember that design is destiny. And lastly, I think just my personal takeaway, creating plastic material flow analyses are very challenging, and they are a great communication tool, but it's also a lot of work that goes into that, especially if we don't have private data from industry. So that's, I think, something that I took away from the last year working on this project. So yeah, if you have any questions, then I guess we have some time later on, but until then, I just hope that we all accept complexity and know that things aren't just black and white in the world of plastics.
Oh, Francie, this is so fantastic, and thank you for making a really clear attempt to make the very complicated communicatable and understandable. It's not easy. Complexity and clear communication. Well done. Again, I'll just remind everybody at 14:50 Central European time, we come together and we got that time for questions and discussion. That's fantastic. But as again, we're ahead of schedule, which is good, and it gives us a little breathing space. But if again, a couple of little thoughts or questions or observations. Yeah. With circular cities, plastics, we see more. You were talking about this lovely city of Vejle in Denmark, which I haven't had the chance to visit, but it sounds fantastic. And we see more focus and more activity and more projects running in certain geographical regions in Europe and less in others.
Yes.
And we know this. Why do you think that is? And even more importantly, how can we change that across Europe?
Well, I mean, across Europe is one thing, and then when you take it outside of Europe, it's even a whole different story, right?
Yeah.
I think sometimes Netherlands is actually a great example because there is so much going on in the circular economy world, maybe not so much around plastics, but also quite a lot. And I sometimes wonder, and maybe this is just my hunch, that when it's about a system, right? There are many players within a space, and at some point when you reach a certain threshold, maybe that there's this, they reinforce each other. So maybe it's really about strength. You have a strong ecosystem somewhere that is already active in one sector, for example, and there are some certain leaders that try to mobilize the ecosystem to work on a topic. Then more and more projects will sprout in that area. For example, in Amsterdam, there's a strong textiles work going on the circular economy, right? And it seems like they just attract even more activity in that space. And I do sometimes think what makes or makes not a strong system or strong, how do you say, flourishing environment for these projects to take is just also what the governments do to spur innovation and how much they support the local private ecosystem to, I don't know, build new ventures or provide business support. There's so many enabling conditions that cities can provide, and if they are not there, then it's not a surprise that we don't see a lot of activities going on in some other areas in Europe.
Mm. Yeah, I wonder as well. Actually, of course, we're both involved in these super EU projects, and there we do include partners with regions that want to travel further and develop more, and that's good. And I know in other programs as well with the European Union, there is a big focus on how do we get every member state, every region moving up, not just some, because we're not going to fix it if it's just northwestern Europe. It's not going to work, and it has to be everyone together. Yeah. On your again, a couple of minutes spare on your MFA. Mass flow analysis, lovely. Industrial. I could see the industrial ecologist in you coming out. It's fantastic, and I love it. I should declare my interest. I teach on the industrial ecology program Leiden in Delft, and but to some stakeholders, so maybe some of the delegates it's definitely, you've said it's complex. You said that at the end. It's not easy to do, and it is complex, and for some it's scary. It looks super complex and scary, and if we try and do that, I don't understand it, we're going to get lost, it's going to take too much time, and so on and so forth. But at the same time, I would suggest it's really important because it helps us make decisions. So how did cities, people who want to take action on circular plastics, respond? What's a pathway they can get to help them with this?
Just for the city of Vejle, we had a lot of calls with them, with their stakeholders. We have gone through this MFA a lot of times. I think that it's about, first of all, empowering them to read such a document at first, right? So we've always embedded this MFA in a workshop on how to build capacity locally to understand it. And we have embedded it also into a longer document that points to we call them leverage points. So that synthesizes insights based on that MFA. But I think that it's just really important to take away I don't know, it's like such a scary thing that when you see an image like that, right? And what we can maybe do is to sometimes combine flows, for example, and just use graphics to give more detail. So there are some design choices that we're also trying to work with of how an MFA can become more readable. I don't think that this MFA that you've seen is the best example. When you look at Metabolic's website, we have other MFAs that are a little bit easier to read, just because they are not about polymers, but about products, for example. So I think that it's just really about education and empowering cities to take ownership of that data from the very beginning. So don't come with an MFA that is already finished in the end, but do it step by step and make sure they know where this information is coming from along the way.
And maybe a message as well is you don't need an MFA to take action.
Yes.
You can
It's a very important message.
Yeah, you can just take action and you can do something in the way that we've been exploring in this conference and other projects. It's not an essential requirement. No. It does, however, take things a step further when it's needed. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think that it's just. Sorry, one last thing. I think it's the insights are probably also, we could get there without the MFA itself, right? It's more like the canvas to discuss and zoom in and zoom out of the system. So it's maybe really more about the journey to get to the end of the MFA, not the MFA itself.
And finally, we've got a couple of minutes. The mental model. I saw that word. I like that very much. And I heard you say value and taking action and being part of action in cities. How important is that?
I think it's, if I could do one thing, that's where I would start, because it doesn't matter what systems are there, what infrastructure is there. If like fundamentally the way we value materials, we value what we have, it's not going to really change, and it's always going to be a symptomatic treatment. And sometimes, well, when you think about it, we do a lot of things out of values, right? For each other, for people in our families and so on. So I think we kind of have to extend that to our material resources too. And in the end, everything we do is kind of should be driven at least by our values. So I think it's critical to change, but also the slowest and the hardest, obviously. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you. This has really been interesting for me, and thank you for your contribution, and please we'll come together on the round table in a little while. Okay, moving on. Marion, and let me say a few words about Marion. Is a systemic design researcher that explores social representation transformation. I like this, that occurs during transitions towards circular economy and cosmopolitan localism. Sorry, I should say, working at the Institute for Advanced Architecture of Catalonia, IAAC in Barcelona. And the big focus there is the Fab Lab Barcelona. I'm sure, Marion, you can say more yourself. The floor is yours.
Yes, I will share my screen. Do you see it?
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it's full screen. Thank you.
Okay, so a bit more, yes, about the Fab Lab. So we are involved in the Pop-Machina project also, with the participation of Jessica and Alessandra, who are in part of the team of organization. So we are working a lot on the digital fabrication, and now worked in how to activate local and open manufacturing for the support of circular community and fab cities. I would say that, from my side, and I think from many of you, I was born surrounded by plastics. I take some time to study cognitive plasticity when I was at college. I had my rebellion against plastics, and since then I try to get to know better what's behind plastics. And recently, with this participation of many projects in the Fab Lab, I am co-designing, co-creating, making, and associating some bioplastic made on food waste. And today I'm really glad to be here to discuss about circular plastics that also help in a way to reflect on what we are doing here in this maker movement. So it already has been said, but of course we can see that plastic is in tension, and we have all been touched by all this image and this reality of plastic pollution, and the plastic waste is one of the big issues when we talk about plastic. When we were looking at the size of industrial sites, it's quite also like when we look at maritime ports and we feel really small. Also discovering the sanitary issue and social damages that have been caused by the rise of this industry. It's always nice also to remind that when we talk about circularity, that the fuel-based plastic, it's really interesting to think about the rebound effect that could generate circular practice. Plastics is a subproduct, a waste from the petroleum oil industry. So long time ago, it was seen as a new treasure, and we really need to think about that when we are now creating new systems for circularity, taking into account all this complexity. So when we are thinking about recycling plastics, we think about maybe what is the level of sophistication of the technology that we want, the scale of the system we want to create, the type of social impact that are generated by what we are doing. It is not the same to think from the precious plastic perspective in this maker spaces, from the city infrastructure, or from other places where it's still not well managed. When I was thinking about the notion of circular plastics, I also like this idea to improve circularity. One of the main challenge is also to learn about repairing and how we can improve the repairment of our products. And I think nice projects have been were emerging from especially from the maker movement, when we try to look at how we can share 3D model to facilitate repairing, the community of the restarter, the repair center, and expert that really share knowledge and sometimes use plastic, recycled plastic, to just fix instead of redoing all the products. Circular plastics is also talking about the alternative from fossil fuel-based plastic, because as we were saying before, the plastic problem mainly the one with the fossil fuel. And so what all the challenge that we need to, there is a big opportunity, and we know that there is a big emergence of bioplastics, and here also we need to really understand what we are doing behind. Here is a nice example of bioplastic that have been created that are both bio-based and think as biodegradable in really simple condition. And beyond this practice, I show here that this is the bio-bags done by Clara Davis, which was working in the Fab Lab through the Fab Textile, and the Remixel Barrio project to design a set of food waste base materials. It's interesting to share also the knowledge, being transparent about the recipe, to have platform like also materials that could exist on that to get to know better how we can replicate all this project, but also to understand and assess the utility and their impact that they also have. Yeah. And of course, the most radical is about having no plastic and how we create a system where we ban plastics. I will not talk a lot about that, but of course, when we look all the zero waste movements at the city level, when we enter in the zero waste shop, it's really nice to see those practices emerging. And also we need to understand how design and research can help to promote this and to insist on developing this alternative. And this means to dare refusing plastic in our daily habits when relevant and possible. So in terms of research, I think there is 3 levels of intervention when we talk about circular plastic. It's not so, it's complex, as we mentioned before. And I think there is really a big focus to do on caring about material property, provenance, toxicity, and degradability. It's about knowing what's behind the product and material that we are designing, and trying to trade off also between these different property. There is a big part is about, because plastic is also a lot of processes. There is many possible materials that can do plastics, but in terms of processes, we need to think about what is the good size I was mentioning, and how to make fabrication processes eco-efficient and accessible. And one part I want to focus a bit more in the rest of the talk is how to drastically revisit their use in society and how we can do it collectively. So here my focus is when we know all that and we are realizing that, what kind of mindset in terms of research we can have. And we have seen that there is many possibility to improve knowledge and what we are doing with plastics. I would like to emphasize the importance of co-creation and adopting co-creation posture in the project we are designing. And I think with the European project that we do is already quite inside our value. It's important to cross-stakeholder representation and science discipline using credible helix of stakeholder models, going to see society, governments, academics, business perspective, and also crossing science, arts, and technology to do that. In the circular community groups and in the Fab Lab in general, we really like talking about this posture of action research, which is about seeking transformative change through the simultaneous process of taking action and doing research, which are linked together by critical reflection. Here, what is important is that we learn while we are both acting and researching. And also that is not just about creating products with recycled plastic. It's also to understand all the design process and the complexity of the design process that is at stake here. So co-creation is a design process, and it's important to look at how we ideate together, how we generate prototype, how we assess ideas together. And in the maker movement, we have a lot of great value when we enter in the network. We can see the full creativity, the wish to learn and to be more skilled, to be open source. We have this activist mindset that is present, and sometimes is missing a bit, like to be, oh, but what is the impact we are generating? And I think all this new project that is happening around sustainability and circularity raise the reflectivity that is needed to really understand what is the strength of the maker movement in this circular transition. So adopting like a vigilance precaution posture in doing yeah. So how we can do that? So there is, as we saw in the Frenzy talks, many way to model information, and this can use to adopt new to be more aware of the situation. But in terms of intervention, I like the notion of heuristics. And when we talk about co-design and design, it's each of us coming to share their own mental model to build a shared mental construction, and trying to having some external stimulation that can help to to consider a bit the different dimension. And it's interesting to see that this kind of stimulation can help to unlock cognitive fixation and create rupture in usual mode of thinking that we have. So when I'm talking about how to help designer to deconstruct the problem and find a way to approach it, I think all the life cycle thinking, the problem solving method approach like trees, ASIT, the eco-design principle, many toolkits at Canvas that we are designing are here also to do this role, and to by practicing, we really come with new perspective on product, project, services that is being created, of course with their own limits. A particular Zoom, I like this approach that is the conviviality approach, so design for conviviality. I really recommend to read this book of Ivan Illich that really also try to give some cue on how we to best design technology without being alienated by them. And here what is doing is to help people to deal with complex trade-off by fighting away on 6 different threads. So avoiding biological degradation, radical monopoly, over-programming, polarization of power, obsolescence, and trying to manage this frustration that could be generated by this threat. This is the biggest challenge. And I think it's nice to go on this kind of thoughts to really understand and be a researcher, aware and understanding the complexity that is having around him. I will just finish with concrete things. We were working on the Syscode project. It's also an H2020, where we have followed 10 pilots where labs were interfaced for co-creation, and there is 2 pilots who was working on circular community development. The first one is People by Maker Copenhagen, and the second one is Remix El Barrio by Fab Lab Barcelona. So People stand for plastic in, plastic out. So it's really about recycling plastic, and during 2 years, they worked on the apply co-creation method and multiple stakeholder engagement to try how to make this circular recycling system in Copenhagen with the maker ecosystem at the center. The second one is Remix El Barrio, which we have facilitated in Fab Lab Barcelona. This one is about co-designing with biomaterial from food leftover. It was a situation in the district of Poblenou, and it was really nice to participate in this process and to see that at the beginning it was not planned to do this 10 biomaterials that emerge from the project. It was really a co-created adventure with many things happening during the 2 years in terms of management, in terms of creation, in terms of knowledge exchange, that bring to really nice results, and that you can see on the FabLab website. So I think from the experience of trying to adopt this co-creation, action, research posture in building circular community, and also trying to look at how we can be critical face to the technology we are using and how to build system in a more appropriate way. I think that we can just, I will just conclude by that those learning environments need to embrace ecosystem plasticity. So meaning that already we need to think about the ecosystem, different level of stakeholder, being flexible and try to work on the agility, working with different partners to really adjust according to the real needs. There is a really big zoom to do on socio-emotional complexity. It is core, I think, in social innovation and in this co-creation process to better understand how we can foster empathy and really understand and learn from the sociological dynamics. The importance of dialogical thinking, it's that when you face group discussion and that there is many different points of view, different logic, there is a capacity to build upon that and to try to embrace this duality, adopting this dialogical thinking. And of course, working on the regenerative mindset, trying to reconnect, resonate with the environment. And this sometimes really creates stronger bonds between people who are involved in the project. That's all for me. Thanks for this. It was a bit...
Thank you very much. This is so interesting and so many good examples, and I love the video as well with the little links. It really tells a story, a complex story, really quickly. We only have a couple of minutes before we move on to the next speaker, but you showed this complicated diagram with government, industry, academia, and society, I think, as I recall it, weaving together and trying to address these challenges. And I was just reflecting that companies, industry, perhaps they find a barrier in what we're talking about, because they'll sit there and go, okay, so where are the customers and where's the money? You know, and that's an unfair characterization of a lot of companies, but obviously that's one. But the one that I think is perhaps more interesting is citizens. And you know, in our projects and in Pop-Machina as well, we want to reach citizens who may not be the normal people that we reach, or they may not be the usual suspects, we might say. And so you get this vibe around FabLab, for example, and I work with a lovely colleague in the city of Coventry in England, with Sinead William with the FabLab Coventry. And she's also trying to reach different citizens as well. And that's a challenge. And when we have some of the beautiful language, I liked conviviality, I liked heuristics in design, all these types of things you're talking about, where you go to another group of citizens and they go, I don't understand anything that you're talking about. What can FabLab do to bring that all together? How does that work?
Well, it's an ongoing process each time. I think it's about testing, experimenting, and adjusting the way we are telling the story, and also, of course, contacting the different partners. I think something that really worked from the Remix El Barrio project was that at the beginning, you don't have the group that is set up, and you will go to explore different and to contact, make interview, participate to events there, and try to really understand well the vocabulary, the cultural, dimension of each people, what they care about, and I think what is making sense and when co-creation makes sense is that there is really a common problem to solve and a really common value that bring people together. And in that case, it was the wish to understand how food waste can, either can disappear or we can try to build something out from food waste that have value. And I also understand that this soft part of systemic, in a way, it's really hard to share. It's really something that it is also, I don't know, it's us talking about emotion and conflicts in a company. It happens, it's present all the time, but it's really a matter of, we cannot, there is many barriers to have this safe space to talk about that. And yeah, so for sure, it's a lot about the one-to-one relation and the care that we have and some structure of management that open this also, I think.
I think so. And I think what we see in our joint project together, Pop-Machina, is, I like that word, safe spaces. And where we, on the academic side especially, have to change and develop our communication and language and learning for other stakeholders who are not playing the same. We need to shift. We need to communicate differently, and we need to work together differently to find solutions. I find that some of the biggest challenges in my career. In some ways, it's easy working at academic conference level and just talking with people who think and work like I do. It's really hard to shift and change for different audiences who just need it differently. And I think that's exciting. I like that, and I'm enjoying the journey, however tough it is. I love it. We must move on because I'm watching the time. Thank you, Marion, and please stay, because again, as I said before, at 14:50, we have our plenary, and I want to move to the final speaker in this session. And that is our dear colleague, George McLaughlin. George works with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I should declare an interest here. I have been involved working with and supporting the Ellen MacArthur Foundation for many years, in fact, almost since its beginning. And love to do so and love to continue to do so. So I welcome George. George is a research analyst in the New Plastics Economy Initiative innovation team and within the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and that aims to transition the global plastics packaging economy from linear to circular models, economic models, and works with a broad range of stakeholders. But I'll let George talk about that. I noticed as well, George, that you did an MSc in architecture at TU Eindhoven, so that's fantastic. George, the floor is yours.
Thanks very much. I'll just get the sharing on, and then I can get started. So looks like it's disappeared. So give me a moment. I will just find where it is. There we are. I think you should be able to see that now.
That's lovely and clear. Thank you.
Yeah. So yeah, rightly so. Yeah. I am a research analyst at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, and yeah, I work in the New Plastics Economy team. Bit of a jump from studying architecture. My most recent part of that study was in Eindhoven, and that was definitely a period of time where I learned a lot about the circular economy, and also incidentally got into contact with precious plastic, which perhaps is a segue into my plastics journey. So yeah, I'll be taking us through today some of the upstream innovation examples of what we mean by a circular economy for plastics, and I think how it ties into the maker discussions that I've been having today. So it's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour, so hopefully we're ready for it. So this presentation is based on the work in our recently published, well, in the last year, Upstream Innovation Guide, which is a guide to packaging solutions. But a lot of the insights I think are broadly applicable across the plastic sphere, not just packaging. So very simply, we all are aware that today's economy is very wasteful. That's why we find ourselves here. We find ourselves in a take, make, waste linear economy where we take resources out of the ground, we make products from those resources, and we dispose of them as waste. And that's one linear consumption model. And in response to this, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was set up in 2010 with the aim of accelerating the transition to a circular economy. And a circular economy is based on 3 principles, and crucially, this point here, all driven by design. And that's about eliminating waste and pollution so that waste is not generated in the first place, circulating products and materials at their highest possible values for as long as possible, and finally regenerating nature to make sure our activities do not deplete the soil of its nutrients and preserves the natural and biocycle. So what does a circular economy look like for plastics? So the New Plastics Economy is an ambitious initiative which was set up to answer this question. And it's a collaborative initiative that acts as a catalyst to the transition to a plastic system in which plastics never become waste or pollution. And we developed a vision with our range of actors, which incidentally is not dissimilar. And we sit in the middle of the helix of stakeholders that Mariam just presented. I think would be a good example. We work with academia, businesses, governments, and citizens. And through this, we developed this model where we talk about eliminating the plastics we don't need through redesign, innovating for plastics that we do need, making sure they're easily reused, recycled or composted, and finally circulating all materials so they are kept out of the environment and in the economy. So what is upstream innovation? Well, I'll first begin by asking you this question, which is if you came home to find your apartment was flooding, would you immediately start mopping up the water? And I think the answer to that is probably not. You probably would try and find the source of the leak and turn it off first. And simply that's what we mean by upstream innovation. So upstream innovation in a circular economy is rather than working out what to do with a pile of waste once it has been created, it is about preventing the waste from ever having been created in the first place. Whereas downstream innovation focuses on after use, such as collection, sorting, and recycling. And what's important to note is that both these efforts are needed to achieve a circular economy for plastics. But today I am talking about upstream innovation because it gets somewhat less attention. That's not to say that downstream is not important. So why, may you be asking, should we explore upstream innovation? Well, first and foremost, it's about tackling plastic pollution, but it's also a means to, hopefully it's still working. I've just been told that I've run out of memory. If you can still see my screen.
We're still good.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a means to provide the solutions that customers want, capture untapped business opportunities, reduce carbon emissions, get ahead of changing regulation, and of course allows you to join the new normal. But that's all a little bit, there's some details there that I could go into, but in general, what is it that we want to understand? And it's essentially about it's about shifting our mindset. So we think about these 3 things: business model, product, and packaging. And rather than incremental improvements, we move towards fundamentally changing how products are delivered to a user through business model changes, product changes, and packaging changes. So within a circular economy for plastics packaging, how do you apply this mindset? Well, we broke it down into 3 parts, and that's elimination, reuse, and material circulation. And elimination is where packaging or plastic is eliminated whilst user experience is maintained or enhanced. Reuse, pretty self-explanatory, it's reused and rather than discarded after one use. And material circulation is making sure that everything I've just said before applies when the material itself is used, such that it can be recycled or composted afterwards. So strategy 1, elimination. And I'll take you through some examples from the business side of how we've applied these strategies and how these strategies can help tackle the challenges that we're facing with plastic pollution and moving towards circular economy for plastics. So there are 2 strategies for elimination, and this we push quite heavily on. There's direct elimination and innovative, and the difference between the two are that direct elimination is about removing the packaging that does not serve a function that is essential, and innovative is about finding a way of providing that function because it does serve an essential function. So I haven't got any examples of direct elimination today because I didn't know whether it was particularly relevant to our discussion, other than it's a quick win and it should be done at pace. So that involves removing plastic wrap around cans, little plastic wrap around the top of jam jars, all of that. That's direct elimination. That's a quick win. Innovative elimination is a little bit more of a challenge, but it provides a lot more, in my opinion, excitement and opportunity. And there are some examples that exist out there that many of you may be aware of. So the first one is Lush, and they directly eliminated and innovatively eliminated packaging. And their innovative elimination was reformulating the product as solid. And by doing so, they removed over 90 million plastic shampoo bottles. And question you may be asking is, what do you do with all the information that's on the packaging? And that's another part of the innovative elimination. They created an image recognition app that provides the information through augmented reality on your phone to include health, safety, toxicity information. Then another example is Appeal, and it's a edible coating made from plant-based materials to replace shrink wrap plastic. And this is a product that has been launched with Walmart, Asda, and Kroger, and is expanding globally, directly and innovatively eliminating plastic in that sense, with no change for the consumer. So then the second strategy in the tier, once you've eliminated it and everything that you can, and you still need packaging at this point, then you should move to reuse. And this is gaining significant momentum, and many of you are probably aware of reuse in different forms. But we with our network worked out this 4-part split, and these models differ depending on the ownership of the packaging and where the refill or return occurs. And I'll just take you through an example of each, basically. So an example of refill at home is Everdrop's concentrated solid cleaning tablets. You already have the bottle, you keep the bottle, and you get new cleaning tablets that you dissolve in water over time, and you refill that at home at about the cost of €1 per refill, which is comparable with other cleaning systems. Then you've got refill on the go, which is evidenced by Algramo, which began in Chile, but now I'll go into details in a minute, that they're operating globally. And they use a platform of smart dispensing machines with RFID chipped packaging, where your packaging is recognized, the desired quantity is dispensed, and you're charged via an app. And an example is sales of Unilever detergents increased by 356% during Santiago's recent lockdown. And interesting to note is that Algramo is now expanding globally into supermarkets around the world and in different formats and localities, owing to the technology that they have proven at scale. But other techniques are still proven and still work very well. Return from home, Dabba Drop, is inspired by the century-old lunch delivery and return system in Mumbai. And you get your ready meal transported to the doorstep in a reusable tiffin box, and it operates on a monthly subscription, and the container is returned at the next delivery. And not dissimilar to that, but a return on the go model, so rather than you being at home, is Cup Club, and for coffee and other similar beverages, you get it from cafe and coffee shops. It's got a digital ID to track each cup, but Cup Club takes care of the cleaning and washing of the cups. So these 4 different models provide a lot of opportunities when you do need packaging that you can't eliminate. And then finally, there's a piece on material circulation, which is a necessary aspect. And we broke that up into 3 parts: plastics recycling, plastics composting, and substitution. And in principle, it's about designing the packaging to be circulated through either a recycling route or a composting route. And if you're choosing to substitute to another material, same should apply there as well, whether it's paper, aluminium, or otherwise. And some examples of that where it was determined by these companies that the reuse model wasn't necessarily applicable at this time, or that they couldn't directly eliminate. An example is by Joy, and they reformulated their product to make a nut paste for making nut milk at home. So it's an idea of this rethink the product, the packaging, the business model. They rethought the product, the packaging, and the business model, because the business model is delivered. It's delivered by subscription, and by having simplified monomaterial packaging, much easier to recycle than normally these multi-material cartons. And then finally, there's the Biopack Compost Club, and they're a hyperlocal collection and composting service that ensures their serveware is composted in practice with food scraps and organic material. So that was kind of a whistle-stop tour of all the examples, of which there are many more. But hopefully I've got you excited about Upstream Innovation. Now it's really about making it happen. And you may be left thinking all of these questions and more. You know, no packaging reuse, how should I choose between them? When is it applicable for me? Well, we've laid that out in our guides, among many other different relevant strategic pathways that you can take. And this is the 3 steps that we've come up with, which is firstly defining what you're trying to achieve, 2, identifying what are the possible solutions, and 3, then evaluating the pros and cons at a system level. And that last part is the crucial part. And that's where the rethinking model at the beginning occurs. At a systems level, you can think about the business model, the packaging, the product, and wider implications, social, environmental, etc. So I leave you with this description of our website, Upstream Innovation website, where you can get a copy of the Upstream Innovation Guide PDF. If you're not into PDFs, which sometimes can be a bit heavy, we have put all of the same information on the website that is interactive. You can go through our case study database. You can even try our workshopping Miro boards that we've set up, which have already proven to be quite successful with some companies and plastics packs that we work with. And finally, as a note, everything I've just explained to you is available free, of course. We are about spreading what we think is a circular economy approach to plastics. Thank you very much for your time.
Fantastic. I recommend anyone to have a look at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation website, and there's loads of links and there's all sorts of information downloaded and available. They don't pay me. I'm not employed by Ellen MacArthur Foundation, but all that is there, and we certainly support and contribute to that activity. Thank you very much. You reminded me when you were talking about my lovely colleague René Wever, who did his PhD on plastic packaging many years ago. He's now a professor up in Sweden, in Linköping, and an expert in the field. And finally, just as we move into the roundtable and questions and discussions, I just had a little thought while you were talking. Wouldn't it be interesting if in the Netherlands here, as many countries, we have to separate all our plastics from our grocery shopping, for example, and that goes into the recycling. We have to make sure it's all separated out, and I do so, of course. But wouldn't it be interesting if every citizen brought that plastic back to the supermarket and just delivered it to the supermarket? There you go. This is your problem. And you have to deal with it and the cost with it. I wonder how design and activities with plastics would change if that were the case. But anyway, that's not the world we're working in, I know. Let's move to the round table and the questions and discussions. And hopefully we've got all the previous 3 speakers still with us. And I don't know if there's any questions come in. Oh, I see Ben. Ben has a question. Julie, how do we get Ben in for a question?
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes, please.
I have a question to George, and thank you very much for this very insightful presentation. I really liked it. I liked the examples. You brought up this case for food delivery, the metal cans, which I know from Southeast Asia. It's very widely used there. Actually, a Japanese company has been adapting the system. I don't want to mention names here. And they have turned it into designed things that you can take to office, et cetera, as well. So down there, it seems to be an accepted form for anything from small caterings like office lunches and food delivery, as you say. So that's certainly very interesting. The other thing I have observed in the many years I have been living there is, and that's my question to you, is that leaves, say banana leaves or others, are widely used for conservation of products for a few days. Yeah, as you probably know, snacks and sweets and rice cakes and whatever you have are packed in these type of packaging, so to speak. Has there been any research in your foundation or any projects you're aware of where these approaches that are probably hundreds of years old are explored?
So in answer to your question, we're actually working on that at the moment. That specific example, yes, with companies, because it's an abundantly available option for a number of products. Obviously, there are difficulties when it comes to some companies wanting to investigate that, but we're certainly pushing down the pathway of investigating it because of the issue of small format flexibles. Pollution in Southeast Asia is particularly high compared to other regions. So that is a pathway of what we would describe as rapidly biodegradable. It's not something that is an easy topic because you don't want to encourage littering and you don't want to burden natural systems. And the preference would be for composting of food waste and the packaging to go along that pathway. But should packaging leak, leaves are a better option than conventional plastic. But certainly there is research going on in that space, that much I can confirm.
Who would be the one to contact at your organization to learn more about what's going on? Because it has bothered me for years.
It would be me.
Good. I might do that. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Ben. Okay, I'd like to move to Jouke Cornelis. Has a question.
Yes, I've got also a question for George, because we've got a lot of transport from with the pallets, and all the pallets we have to wrap in with a wrapping film. And I ask, we are looking already a long time for an alternative for that, but we can't find it. I don't know if you have research on that topic.
Yep, so that is part of our B2B reuse, business-to-business reuse research, and we do have a reusable pallet wrap system in our database. I can't remember off the top of my head now, but happy to share it with you at some stage. That does exist, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. Great answers, George. You were there. It's like whatever Kit asks, you're already doing it. That's great news. That's great news. Nicholas, please, you have a question.
Yeah, hi from my side as well. Thank you, David. I just have a question for, well, basically all of you. The thing with research, when you go upstream, you always encounter incumbent structures, whether it's business or public administration or what have you. So it takes its time, and there's a timeline down the road, 5 or 10 years until adoption. In some cases faster, in some cases slower. How is research being instilled in downstream to the more early stage grassroots efforts or community efforts? And how is this kind of knowledge passed on to the more community level? And I have a follow-up question afterwards.
Who was your question to?
The question is for all. I mean, in terms of research, there's two pathways, like it was presented, upstream and downstream. But the upstream was presented, and I understand it because I've been working in industry myself, but the downstream thing is, how do you get this kind of knowledge distributed down to communities which are not, you know, that easy to pinpoint and communicate and so on?
Should I ask Frenzy, do you have some thoughts on this?
Well, I certainly have some thoughts on this. I think that one of the important pathways that I see is just the teaching the teacher approach that we have already heard in the previous discussion. I think I came here a few minutes early and you were talking about that. So, you know, the conditions in every city, every community are so different. It's really important to find some champions who take that knowledge and teach it. I think it's really important that these discussions become part of the curricula in local schools, and that can be actually in all kinds of schools, from primary school to university. I know Sitra, for example, is a Finnish environmental agency. They have done really, really great curriculum for different school levels. And I think that this approach is critical to break it down. So teach the teacher and integrate that knowledge into curricula for local schools of all kinds of different levels.
Yeah,
okay.
I think.
And a follow-up question, if I may?
Yes.
Please go on. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, go on.
So apart from my involvement in Pop-Machina and makerspaces, working with makers at the community level, through my company, we're working on returnable transport items, right? So and I take this from the last comment, the last discussion that was, the last comment from Ben. Apart from the silos of returnable transport items with specific companies, there's also the notion of having that as a universal asset that people can tap in, companies can tap into that. Is there any direction in research towards this kind of sharing economy at an industrial level?
I'll turn to Chris. I know Chris wants to ask or make an observation as well. So Chris, maybe you can do both things at once.
Well, to be honest, my comment was relating to your previous question because I'm afraid I don't have much of an answer to your second one. Right, so I'll just make my original comment anyway, which was actually, I think, another way through which we as researchers can contribute to the trickling down of this knowledge and information to community level, city level, is also by citizen science type of research. Quite often people are participating to it without really knowing the bigger picture, the bigger story behind it. But gradually, when through their participation, they get to learn more about it, and they are being informed and sensitized in the right direction. So this is a way. A good example where we were involved in was it's not unfortunately not on a circularity topic. It was on air pollution, but it was the so-called Curieuze Neuzen project that we had in Belgium, which involved 50,000 people and their families, you could say. So 50,000 families, 20,000 of which were measuring air pollution through something they were hanging outside, kind of a sensor. They were hanging outside of their houses. And we had 7 surveys to them with all the correct information. So people had some misconceptions about certain impacts of causes and impact in terms of air pollution. And in the end, we measured their knowledge at the beginning at the end of the project compared to at the beginning, and it had increased significantly. So I think that's one way to trickle it down to the level of average citizens.
Thanks, Chris. Nicholas, you had a second question where I don't think we've answered it, correct?
Yeah. Do you want me to repeat the question? I think.
Yeah, do it short.
Yeah, I'll do it short. So it's more of a systemic thing. Companies are now moving towards returnable transport items, replacing one-off wrapping or packaging or containers. But then again, we're talking about silos and we're not talking about sharing that kind of commodity. So systemically wise, does it make sense to do that?
Yes.
George, yes, I was going to then thinking, yeah, you showed an interesting example from Mumbai. I wonder if that's useful.
Yes, I think in answer to your question simply is yes, that is systems change. That is what needs to be spread, and that's what companies are interested in. And there's a lot of efforts out there around the world that are engaged in that process, not just in the McArthur Foundation. Both locally, there are NGOs working in the space of ensuring that reuse is adopted by companies, and they're working with local governments and regional governments and national governments. And within our own example of plastics, we have plastics pacts where companies can sign up to that. And within the plastics pact framework, it's not just about recycling, it's about moving towards reuse models where possible. And then we also have the global commitment where over 1,000 companies have signed up to a certain set of criteria that they have to meet by 2025, of which some of that is moving towards reuse and elimination as a priority. So there are efforts going on out there, perhaps distributed, perhaps unknown by some companies, but yeah, there are some. I think that answered your question. If it doesn't, please let me know otherwise.
Well, Frenzy wants to come in and say something as well, please.
Yeah, I just want to share another insight that has occurred through the Reflow project, because the city of Vejle has done a lot of work on potentially reusable and returnable packaging with one of their retailers. And I thought they came up with a lot of important challenges to what currently makes this not really widely adopted. And one of them was, for example, if we have B2B packaging that is plastics and they would like to close the loop and return into the same stream, there are a lot of challenges with that. First of all, not being able to do food packaging, like direct reuse, not possible. There's a lot of like washing facility infrastructural challenges. And also, yeah, it's a really complicated supply chain. So the city tried to bring everyone to the table and understand the barriers that they each other face. So that's maybe one thing, and to not wanting to play the devil's advocate, but another challenge that has come up. Sometimes it doesn't make sense from a carbon emission, for example, to have these closed loop return systems, because they would just mean basically more transportation, more greenhouse gas, and is that really what we want? Is it maybe better to have an open loop recycling where they take a certain item and put it into a different stream instead of trying to force it back into the beginning? So it's just, I think we have to be smart about the way we kind of compare these scenarios, right? It's not, it's not exactly. A given one is better than the other.
There's always a thing, I see this regularly in circular discussions, and it all comes down to, it all depends. And so we often have that as an introduction. So should I do this or should I do that? Well, it all depends. Let's analyze the situation and think about it carefully, step by step. Chris, you wanted to say a few words on this as well.
Yes, actually, where I live in Flanders, there's been quite a lot of discussion lately, including on company level, to find packaging solutions. And that was because we had some new legislation in Flanders. But I think I haven't followed it in detail, but I think it was a transposing European directive, and that in a couple of years there will be like these, maybe George knows better, all kinds of solutions will be like not free or voluntary, but there will be strict requirements on this, so that we can expect like acceleration of all these kinds of reuse and more recycling of packaging, no?
Yeah, that's definitely the case. There's the Single-Use Plastics Directive and the Packaging and Packaging Waste Directive, both recently updated to mandate rapid changes. So one to look out for.
Yeah, and we shouldn't underestimate the power of the European Union in this, because any country outside the EU that wants to import into Europe, and many do, of course, every day, they have to comply. So it isn't just a thing that takes action and bites within Europe and drives change. It drives change all over the world. And just coming back to the discussions that we had more widely during the sessions, and there's one thematic, and this relates to our Pop-Machina project that we talked about a little bit. Well, we talked about a lot, and Chris focused on this extensively. We have this challenge that we're still working through, where we have science, complexity, academia, and a level of discussion that goes on over this side. And then we have municipalities, citizens, people who are excluded on this side of the discussion. And of course, the core, as Chris beautifully explained, is of Pop-Machina, is we're trying to bring these two sides together. And I just wanted to bring Marion in on this. This is a real challenge that we're working through, and we will crack this nut. But did you have any thoughts on that and approaches that we're taking that you think are working?
Yes, I think it's a common problem in such a European project. When we also, in the Cisco project I was mentioning before, there was always this gap between the researcher and the practitioner in a way. It's not exactly the same, but it's having this space of reflection during in your European project where we discuss about the task, we discuss about the many things, and after we transmit to some knowledge and we co-design the approach that the pilots have locally. And so yeah, about the issue, I think it's something that is transversal and is not just on Pop-Machina, about some reflection to overcome them. I think there is two parts. There is one part is really about the management side of the project to involve the core pilots inside the task and the core the core management. And the other thing that that we also need to do with that, I think it's something that we need to understand the timeline, the constraint, all of this dimension from the pilot perspective to really get to create the best dialogue possible. Now, in a way, it's not an easy task, but as we were mentioning, this kind of learning moments where we are on site, talking with the partner, trying to really dialogue with them. Maybe it's true that with this pandemic situation, we have much more virtual talk, and sometimes it could also disconnect the pilot from their real the potential of the collaboration between the researcher and the cities. And what is interesting also sometimes is that this knowledge is really bidirectional now, is that sometimes in many projects we have the impression that we come with models and they need to apply the toolkit, they need to apply the things, but in fact sometimes the city is much more advanced. That's what we are proposing at the initial of the project. So it's really a matter of when we start the project, well, crossing the point of view and being, what we were saying before, a bit aware and open to adjust, change, and be curious on that. And when there is limitation, well, trying the best way to bring new perspective, new people on the activities there.
Yeah, thanks for that, George. Ellen MacArthur Foundation, you do many things, of course, and you've been doing it for a long time. But I think, and I'm going to propose this to you, one of the strengths of the organization is a really super and clever way of communicating in a way that academia, for example, universities in particular, could learn from. What do you think about that? And also, just on that thought, there's citizens and there's business, and they're not the same, are they? Question mark.
No, so I think I'll start with your last question first, which is that in the foundation we work not just with businesses, but we have our entire learning team who work on educational applications of the circular economy through schools, through universities, engaging all around the world on the topic. And then there's the teams that I work in, for example, the systemic initiatives that work more with business and government. But in terms of the communication, yeah, I mean, I speak as an employer. I guess we're drilled on communication. There's definitely a piece in learning. We were taught a lot about the models of communicating, simple messages. We have lots of training on it. But yeah, in general, there's a lot of resources out there. I'll try and think of any on top of my head for now. None that come to mind, but if I say, I can send some through. But yes, it is about communicating the ideas as simply as possible. And we constantly, whenever we write anything, go over and over and over it, if not more time or equal to what we spend researching it, making sure that whatever we're saying can be understood by our grandparent, for example. And it is as simple as that. We try and distill it to the core argument. And if it can't be understood, then we haven't done a good job. So that's basically what we work on.
And sorry, Frenzy, but Chris, as a fellow academic in a university, what do we need to learn? Do we need to do things differently? How can you give us some more thoughts on bridging this gap?
Well, I think one of our duties is to explain also to our students the complexity of some of these issues. You know, when I'm teaching, I tend to tell my students that looking at the plastics problem and then comparing it to climate change mitigation and getting to net zero, I think the latter is actually easier to solve than the former, because for getting to net zero, we know which solutions we need. They are available. It's just the complexity is in the implementation. But if you look at the plastics problem, and then George is saying, oh, you need to eliminate part of it, that's really a complex story. And Frenzy was also highlighting this, the fact you can eliminate some of the packaging, but then you get more food waste. And actually the environmental footprint of your food is usually much larger than the environmental footprint of the packaging, which is not known by most citizens or students. So I think this type of misconceptions is important and to do away with. And I think we as academics and like other actors as well, and the other panelists here in their organizations, just the same, I would say, have the duty and we need to find such misconceptions and explain how it really works and what true impacts are. And as Frenzy also said, sometimes closed loop recycling maybe is not the best solution for the environment. I think these are the things that make it complex, and it's our job to look beyond the hypes and the popular answers and to see where real impact and real solutions are. I would say that we need to contribute to that challenge.
Yeah, thanks for that. And I just reflect, Chris, you quite rightly said, you know, when we talk to our students, and because I'm talking to my students all the while as well, that's one education activity that's essential. Of course it is with our students, but when we go to the municipality, when we go to the citizens, we need to change it. But I wonder actually, and maybe this is what George was saying, and maybe Frenzy or Marian can come on this. It's certainly not about making it simple and dumbing it down. That's not what it's about at all. And Ellen MacArthur Foundation don't do that as well. You know, it doesn't treat citizens as well. Okay, we'll make it simple for you to understand. That's not how you treat people. It's about putting the messages in different ways, and then about giving the opportunity maybe of much more complexity behind. Maybe Frenzy, you can say something about that, because you were explaining about mass flow analysis. Hi citizens, let's look at mass flow analysis and like the Sankey diagrams, because I love Sankey diagrams, of course I would do, but
I
you
have
know.
a love-hate relationship with them.
Yeah.
I was actually going to go back to the communications issue, which I think is really important. And this is maybe more relevant for the municipalities in contact with cities, but equally with businesses. I would say that it's all about framing and sometimes hiding circularity behind different motives. As an example, we talk with cities and people who are involved in city work across the entire world, and it just becomes very obvious that a city in Southeast Asia interested in COVID recovery, poverty reduction, you have to frame circular economy and the challenges of plastics really in that sense, right? There are potentials to solve poverty and then ride a wave of the circular economy. So it's kind of finding the right entry points. And if countries are real, cities are really interested in greenhouse gas reductions, it's about finding the right entry point through the circular economy or plastics economy to showcase how that can help them achieve carbon emission goals, for example. So maybe this is not really about breaking down the complexity necessarily, but about finding the entry points for communication to have an open ear and to begin with, to then be able to explain the details.
George, thank you, Franzi. Do you think, Franzi just mentioned there, climate change, energy emissions, and then there's materials, and we were looking in this case at plastics in a circular economy. I wonder if that narrative, in other words, I often say to my students, energy and materials are two sides of the same coin. You can't get energy without materials, and you can't get materials without energy. And in a low carbon transition without fossil fuels, this becomes more and more important, and plastics as part of that has already been shown in the presentations today. Do you think policymakers at the municipality, the local level, at the provincial level, or at the regional and the national level, do you think they understand this well enough and understand the messages that we're giving them?
I think there is an understanding. I think there is a piece in meeting people where they are and having a conversation which is very contextually driven, which is what Frenzy was pointing towards. But, you know, it is a challenge, and there's still misconceptions out there. Energy is seen as the quick win in comparison to materials, when obviously we understand there are two sides of the same coin. Embodied energy and material production consumption is if not as important as the energy that brings the materials from one place to another. So it's coming through. It's coming through, and it comes through with what we would describe as lighthouse effects. So I think you mentioned the EU, rightly or wrongly, it's application of policy and the way in which some of the members of the EU Commission help to apply that with circular economy thinking helps to act as a lighthouse for other places around the world that enables some of those lessons to be implemented locally. So really it's about pinpointing the localities with the most receptiveness. I think that's not even a word, I apologize. You know, are they receptive to circular economy? If not so much of an issue really. You work with those that want to, the rest will follow, come what may. And picking up on your point right at the beginning, I know you brought up lightly about people bringing their plastic back to supermarkets. On that topic, with regards to governments, we recently released a paper on extended producer responsibility, which actually means that the companies responsible for putting all of this material out there should pay to get it collected from your home, not necessarily you bringing it back to your local store. So governments around the world have endorsed and are willing to implement. So it's out there.
Yeah, there's a lot moving quite quickly on the policy scene. Marianne, talking about Barcelona, for example, we talk about a city, we talk about a municipality, and Santander in Spain as well, and I know we're working together with them. What are their opportunities and what are their limitations? So in terms of this plastics circular transition, with makerspaces we've been talking about in the projects we're involved in, what can they do and what can't they do?
Okay, it's a super complex issue here.
Yes, I know.
When I listened to George, I was also thinking to the French context, which with this extended responsibility is there for quite a long time. And it's true that when I went to walk in Barcelona, I was surprised when you look at the street, how plastic is present compared to other country like this. So I would say that the plastics and it's something that really is important, especially in Barcelona, that we have also the sea there. So we have also the problem with the plastic coming from the sea. And we saw that when there is like the bad weather, we see the plastic all along the beach. In terms of policies, there is many action from the government of Catalonia and also from the city now to tackle circularity. They have done many different action plans, and I know more the law on food waste. There is one which is particularly interesting because also in parallel we talk a lot about food packaging, and I think it touched in a way the topic. And they are creating a law to really understand all the food waste hierarchy and try to understand who are the stakeholders for each, and really try to put some incentives to better support this new value chain, new ecosystem that are creating. Especially, for instance, there is one foundation named Espigolador, which aim is to go to the different farmer places where there is too much fruits and vegetables that could not be sold, so not packaged, and try to transform them in like product that could be sold. And something is quite interesting also inside the Fab Lab Barcelona with the project that we have around circular communities, because we are trying to implement the precious plastic approach here. So really trying to gather different all the infrastructure there. So we have the place where we process all the recycled plastics, and now all the challenge is to understand what kind of strategy we would put in place to collect the plastic, because we identify many possible provider of plastic, because the plastic is quite present really in the city. So there is, we are testing now, and it's quite interesting to see how could this makerspace could work also closely to the city green points, collect points, and to try to see and to see there concretely in our makerspace how we can manage this, but also not just the city, also how the makers can bring their own plastics, and all the different rules that need to be followed in terms of safety, in terms of to really sustain in a way and make this practice of recycling a reality there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, well, here we are. We're drawing to a close on this session now, and I'm going to wrap up as best I can, unless there's any urgent points that any of the speakers wanted to contribute. No, I don't see you all jumping up and down, so that's good. What I think we've seen in this session, and because this session is about the research, the cutting edge activities, what we're doing to try and address this issue of plastics and circularity. I think I draw a number of things from what I've heard today and seen from the speakers. We have research, scientific research, complexity, we have academia, research organizations, we have leading not-for-profit organizations as well, sending out a message around circularity and plastics, which in terms of, maybe if I can use the T-shaped analogy, if we take a big letter T, we go very deep, and we go very deep and very complicated. PhDs, and I of course would mention my lovely colleague Tanya, who's on the call today as a PhD example, doing the research in this field in a complex way, which I even struggle to understand myself sometimes, an admission of failure there. And then across the top, we have this broad width of actions and activities. I see something focusing, which I've always loved and always been interested in, the circular city. And that's quite interesting. Of course, it doesn't exclude citizens who don't live in cities across Europe or across the world. But as we move through the 21st century, more and more people will live in cities, and those cities will be bigger. And that is where the big impacts and the big opportunities for a circular transition come. And I see within those cities, and I see within the cities in the project, Pop-Machina project as well. And what a wonderful spread of cities we have, from a mega city like Istanbul to quite a small regional city like Venlo, for example. And I picked those two because they're on either end of the population size scale. We have citizens, and I am constantly encouraged by the citizens in our cities. They really, really want change. And I think I feel, maybe I want to feel it, but I think it's true. I feel citizens want a difference. It's no more of the same old, and we can't go on with the same old, So from that, I get optimism from our citizens and from our colleagues in our cities around us, and especially those who are more on the edge, perhaps more excluded. That's something we focus on. So it's the bringing together in, and I like the word Marianne said, safe spaces. You know, spaces where, and they can be virtual and they can be physical, and they come together and we get opportunities for addressing the circular plastics challenge. I think on that, am I right, Julie? We're coming up to a short break.
Yes, you're right, Dave. Thank you so much. Right on time.